Anyone ever found a body? What's that like? I worked at a retirement home for about a year. More specific at the dementia part of the house, and we had one man who every day was worried sick for his wife, who has been dead for 8 years. On his birthday both of his daughters showed up and talked and showed slot of pictures. He didn't remember his daughters but he recognized his wife. Tears of joy he watched pictures and told stories. The morning after when I went to wake him up he was dead. He had a big smile on his face and it was somehow very very beautiful. Found my dad dead, heart attack, one morning as a 7-year-old. Sad face. Then when I was 8 I found my grandfather dead, hit his head, into tub full of water, one morning. Our town's baseball fields for Little League is in front of a small fence row of woods with an interstate on the other side. One hot day in July, like 90F all week, everyone at the game started smelling something awful. A couple of the dads and coaches went to go look and there was a dead guy on the interstate side of the fence row. I guess a trucker broke down and was walking for help and died of heat stroke. I was playing baseball and never actually saw, but still a crazy day. Got back to my GF's house after doing some grocery shopping for her mom, and when we went inside, something was _off_. Found her older brother with slit wrists in the tub just about the time their mom pulled into the driveway. It was unpleasant. I was walking to school one day when I noticed a car in an alleyway with a broken windshield that had a big brownish stain. When I walked up I saw a dead guy. Turned out he was shot in the head the night before. The blood looked brown because he had been there for a while. Was with my mom. We were doing an occupancy check because this guy's hadn't paid his rent. This behavior was normal for the people who live on the property, so we go in and see if the apartment was empty. I go to the back room and he's dead in bed. I found my dad after he hung himself. It was obviously extremely traumatizing and has taken a lot of therapy. I still get triggered if a movie shows a hanging scene, but I'm doing a lot better. Found my uncle dead in his apartment. I learned that day what a rotting body smells like. The answer is rancid fish. I was at the shooting range once, my first time actually, and an older gentleman shot himself in the stall closest to the door. Everyone had to walk right past his body to evacuate. Gruesome. It looks more disturbing in real life than the movies, and everything moved more slowly once I saw it. I was just getting comfortable with my weapon when they called a ceasefire and I stood there wondering what had happened. Suddenly it was calls of, "Everybody get out. Now. Go. Go." Pretty terrifying when you can't initially see what's on either side of you because of the lane barriers and you're wondering what the hell happened so bad we're evacuating, then just really sad to realize what happened. There was a kid there about 10 years old with his dad and brother. Hate it. Found 4, all at once. Well, actually, the 4th body had been jammed so far under the front passenger seat that I didn't see it. Wear your damn seat belts, people. Not me, but my dad did. He was fishing and found a guy floating in the Kentucky River. He at first thought it was a dead cow until he paddled closer. The man was badly decomposed and bloated. Our local small town sheriff's department used my dad's boat to transport the body. My dad had trouble sleeping for a while afterward and sold the boat a few weeks later. My grandpa found a body decades earlier in the same area and my uncle did too. It's believed the guy my dad found accidentally fell in while high on meth. I've seen 2 PPL die, one hit by a car and the other in a workplace accident, and it's something I hope to never have to see again. I used to work in self-storage, and when I left, a buddy of mine took over the property I used to manage. We took a weekend off from our respective jobs to go to Vegas a few years ago. He lived on site in a company apartment. When we got back late in the evening, he walked around his property as is pretty typical. There was a car parked with someone in it. He knocked on the window and got no response. He called me and told me about it, and as I was close by, I told him I'd be right there. As I got close to the car, I could smell death. The car was locked and all the windows were fogged up inside. It was obvious that the person inside was dead. He called the police and they responded with fire and medical. Yeah, the guy was dead. Reviewing the security cameras showed him come in and park there about 36 hours earlier. It was an overdose. I don't think it was ever determined to be accidental or suicide. I have posted this before, but in the 1980s, I found a human skeleton while doing land surveying work. The property was about 40 acres in size and wooded. I had gone down a property line to cut a tree limb that was blocking our line of sight. I noticed some bones scattered around. That didn't mean much at first, because animals die in the woods all the time. You see bones. But then I saw the skull and my heart jumped up in my throat. I went back to my truck and radioed it in. I was in the land before cell phones. The sheriff's department came out and started an investigation, but they told me they were fairly sure who it was. We were in a smaller town and there was only one missing person. An elderly man with dementia had vanished about 18 months before. That's who it turned out to be. I was interviewed by our local and regional newspapers. Got my picture in the paper. That was a bit uncomfortable as it made me slightly known for a while, but people soon forgot about it. At least the Mons family got some closure. I didn't exactly find a body, but I had a neighbor in my apartment building jump. I didn't know what happened at first, as I just saw a man lying on the sidewalk and I couldn't see much from my first-floor apartment. I worked in human services with homeless folks and saw that he wasn't wearing shoes, so my first thought was that he was intoxicated and he either fell or passed out. I ran outside worried that he was overdosing. As soon as I ran out the front door, I saw that on the other side of his head was a massive pool of blood and I realized what happened. He was gasping for air with wide, open eyes when I got to him. His pulse was weak. My GF was already calling 911, so I tried to gauge responsiveness and keep him conscious. But the entire time, he felt cold. I remember thinking that his skin felt like rubber. Someone else came outside and did CPR when we couldn't find a pulse anymore. He was dead by the time EMTs arrived. And #X200B. All of that really haunted me, but what bothered me most was that for weeks after I would often hear women in the apartment gossiping about it and talking about how they watched it all happen from their balconies. The thought that so many people watched him jump and didn't even try to help bothers me more than anything else. Came across a drunk driving accident. Probably happened a minute or two before we drove up to it since no one else was there, and it was on the highway. 0.65 miles per hour speed limit. It was awful. Called the cops and went to see if we could help, but they were clearly dead. One had been ejected out of the windshield and was lying on the highway. The driver turned out to be 20 years old. Really sad. Edit, just added a few more details like the driver's age. Was first on the scene of a head-on collision. Both drivers dead on impact. We walked up to both cars to see if we could help, but it was obvious they were dead. A couple of days later there was an article in the paper about it, and the girl was a teenager. So sad. I got chills down my back and felt like throwing up. Saw a contractor at work get smoked by an electrical arc from switchgear connected directly to the power company. He was wiping sweat from his eyes when the switchgear arced. His left foot was still in his boot, but that was about all that was left. Years ago my kids SND were at the NC coast in the off-season. We watched a tourist boat go by in the distance and then a short while later the lifeguard behind us took off running into the surf. We watched as he met up with a Coast Guard boat in the distance as they pulled a body onto the boat. We later learned that someone had fallen off the tourist boat and drowned. Then we saw the lifeguard come back out of the water and he looked so defeated. One night I was out walking my dog along a country road where a ditch accompanied the road either side. As I was walking my dog started going mad trying to tug away from his lead to this ditch, so I wanted to see what it was. It ended up being a corpse, so I called the cops. They found out that a gang murder happened in a city about 40 miles away and one of the members thought a small village would be a great place to put it. I was a volunteer with the fire brigade in my former life. We responded to a car accident on a notorious bend a little out of town. People tend to take this particular S-bend way too fast. It's a 100 zone, but cars can't take such tight swerving bends at that speed and not end up a broken mess. So we arrive as the first responders on the scene. Being volunteers, we generally get to events prior to police and ambos. There's a car that had almost made it around the first bend, but lost control, careered across the opposite side of the road, rolled, went through a fence and ended up wrapped around a tree near the second bend 200 meters away. The driver had nearly been decapitated and the front passenger had become part of the car. There was a children's car seat about halfway between both bends that had been ejected from the car likely as it rolled. 4 of us were sent to see if there was anyone injured around. I found the toddler in the paddock dead. I quit not long after that. Don't speed. Buckle your kids up properly. My manager and I were talking once. bonding over outshared experiences living in South Africa. I was born on Durban, she in Johannesburg. She told me that when she was 12/13 a boy in the year below her went missing. Parents suspected he had been kidnapped, and filed a missing person straight away. The school was a tremendous help. Posters, assemblies, overall tougher security. It was the middle of the summer, and the worry grew as the days went by. Almost 2 weeks after his disappearance, his father is checking the garden, FYI. A lot of gardens are more like large plots of land. Unlike the cubes of grass I'm used to here in the UK, he gets to the wall at the other side of the garden and the smell hit him. My manager told me that they suspected the boy had been playing and climbed over the wall, tripped and hit his dead. I can't imagine what a body must look and smell like in the open, for 2 weeks, in scorching weather, but it's not something a parent should ever have to witness sad face. When I was 8 I was walking with my dad and dogs deep in the woods and the dogs started barking at something at a distance. Bears and cougars were a possibility so I was looking as hard as I could and I saw a mannequin maybe 50 yards away. My dad said there's no way. One of the dogs kept barking at it from about half the distance between us and wouldn't come back. My dad went off the trail to retrieve the dog and shouted toward what I now could make out was a person. Hey there, sorry about my dog, I don't know what. He stopped, rushed back with the dog and said we have to go home right now. At the time my 8-year logic assumed that it must be a person he doesn't like from work or from the neighborhood or something and he just didn't want to chat. We walked home fast and in silence and he went back out right away. A few hours later he came home with 2 police officers asking me about what I saw. I remember explaining that I thought it was a mannequin but I realized it was a really quiet person. What I didn't know how to explain was that there was an absolute stillness about him. The officers didn't tell me then and my dad didn't tell me until I was 16 but what I saw was a man who had hung himself. Twice. The first time, I was living in a major city and a pedestrian was apparently run over during the night. His body landed in front of my home, 2 houses down from where he was hit. The second time, in another town, there was a dead man lying in my street. It was determined he was fighting with another guy and they were chasing each other through the streets. The deceased was stabbed. When I was 4 and staying with my grandparents, my grandma sent me to wake my grandpa. Well, he didn't wake up. Don't remember much, just that my grandma was kinda shocked and started crying. I doubt I really did grasp what was happening there. I walked in on my brother hanging himself from our bunk bed when I was 13. He got into an argument with my stepdad about something stupid. I apparently got him down by myself, I don't remember that part, and my stepdad gave him CPR and the like while I called 911. He was life-flighted from the high school football field and I am very thankful to have my big brother around today. I used to work early mornings, 4 a.m. shift, and on my way to work one day after a bad snowstorm I noticed a car that had flipped over off the side of the highway. It was covered in snow and in a deep ditch, and if I hadn't been driving so slowly due to the icy conditions I would have missed it. Pulled over, and made my way over to see the driver obviously dead behind the wheel. What bothers me most is his injuries didn't look severe enough to kill him. I'll never know for sure but I am afraid he became trapped in his car and froze to death. I'm not sure if this counts but I was walking to school, elementary, one day like 8 a.m. I'm between 9 to 11 past a 3-story building and there was a body hung off the side. Turns out dude shot his wife then hung himself from his balcony. No one got there soon enough to deal with it before all the kids walked by and saw. Even by after school he was still there but they covered him with a blanket. Fun stuff. I'll see if I can find the news report. September 13, 17 I found my sweet 34Y. husband dead in his recliner. He sincerely wanted his body donated to science. An autopsy is not performed when a body is gifted to science, so we can only guess how he passed. There was no doubt that he was gone when I saw him. A color I can't describe, a coldness unexpected upon touching him, his bright green eyes wide open looking at nothing. Thankful our daughter was at his parents' house so she didn't find him. All I can piece together is that BC of his horrible chest cold the meds he'd taken either knocked him out and he didn't take his evening epilepsy meds and had a grand mal seizure or the OTC meds interacted with his epilepsy meds and caused allergic reaction. Well never know. I miss him every day. A full family, father mother plus 2 kids, dead in an upside-down car on a dark road. I was pretty young. My mother and I were leaving a mall and walking home. We walked past a dumpster and we saw legs sticking out from a large collapsed cardboard box. We walked over to a bank and told them to call the police. It was an old sick homeless man that had just died. It was pretty anticlimactic. It's depressing now when I think about it in depth. I mean, yes, but I work at a hospital and used to work in a nursing home, and it's not as alarming in those settings. I used to work at this sports bar, so it wasn't uncommon for people to leave their car in parking lot for a day or two. After having a couple days off, I come into work and this car that was there a day before my weekend started is still parked in the same spot. I tell me boss about it and go check it out. As I get close to the car, the smell hits me like a truck. Some guy committed suicide in his car during a heat wave in the middle of summer. I called the cops and tell my boss. When the police arrived, I was asked to make a statement. While I was doing this, the paramedics showed up to remove the body. They got this bloated, rotten corpse halfway out of the vehicle when it just fell apart, splattering on the pavement. I'll never forget that fucking smell. Went to check on my uncle because he'd not been heard from. I knew before I got the front door open that he was dead by the smell. He was in his recliner. Drank himself to an early grave. My granddad was a few months shy of 90 and still lived by himself. He was pretty spry. My mom called him every morning. One day he didn't answer, so she called me to go over and check on him. They lived about 40 minutes away and I lived about 5 minutes away. I let myself in and found him in his easy chair holding his phone. He was cold. My dad showed up in about 20 minutes and we both cried. I called the police and they came in, checked it out and did us a favor of calling the funeral home we asked. My dad said he was talking with him about 9 p.m. the night before and said he was sounding groggy, so he said good night, and granddad must have rested and passed. He was a great guy. Edit, I am overwhelmed with all the kind comments and awards. I truly thank you all. In November of 2004, I had a very best friend who lived 3 blocks from me. We were both managers of the same restaurant, but I had recently graduated from college and had started my career path but still worked with him on weekends and school vacations. One freezing cold Monday night, the restaurant called saying he hadn't shown up for work. I had a key, so my roommate and I walked over. Upon entering his apartment, he was dead on the couch after taking more than 1 bottle of Ambien and a handle of vodka. I don't remember all the details of what I remember from the scene or what it looked like. I'm paying a lot of money in therapy to forget. Thanks for watching. See you later.